There exists a form of cruelty so subtle, so insidious, that it often goes unnoticed until the damage has already carved deep wounds into your soul. And this cruelty reveals itself most viciously when you dare to grow, when you dare to evolve beyond the prison of manipulation that once defined your reality. This isn't the explosive rage you might expect, nor the dramatic scenes that leave obvious scars. This is something far more sinister, a calculated campaign of emotional erosion designed to punish you for the cardinal sin of becoming whole without their permission. If you've ever felt an inexplicable heaviness when you're around certain people, if you've noticed your energy drain in ways that seem almost supernatural, if you've wondered why your personal growth seems to trigger something dark and vindictive in those who were once closest to you, then what I'm about to share will illuminate shadows you never knew existed. And I encourage you to engage with this content, like this video, share it with someone who desperately needs this awakening, and subscribe, because understanding this silent warfare might be the very key to protecting your soul during the most vulnerable stages of your transformation. Carl Jung spoke extensively about psychological projection, but he understood something darker: the way wounded individuals become unconscious agents of destruction toward those who represent everything they failed to become. When you begin to heal, when you start setting boundaries, when you discover your authentic voice and begin using it courageously, you become a living mirror that reflects back to the narcissist everything they have refused to face about themselves. Your growth doesn't just inspire envy, it triggers an existential crisis that cuts to the very core of their carefully constructed identity. You represent living proof that healing is possible, that people can genuinely change, that the elaborate excuses they've built their entire personality around are nothing more than sophisticated self-deceptions. And for this unforgivable crime of growing, of becoming, of healing authentically, you must be punished through what I call the silent revenge. The punishment begins with what appears to be subtle indifference. But make no mistake, this is calculated emotional warfare, where once they might have engaged with your achievements through overt criticism or dramatic reactions, now they deploy something far more devastating: the strategic withdrawal of acknowledgement. Your successes are met with blank stares, your breakthroughs with dismissive silence, your moments of genuine joy with an almost imperceptible but deeply felt emotional absence. This isn't mere disinterest. This is calculated emotional withholding, designed to make you question the very value of your own growth. Jung would recognize this as a form of psychological murder, an attempt to systematically kill the parts of you that have dared to flourish beyond their control. What makes this silent revenge particularly insidious is how it masquerades as maturity or emotional evolution. On their part, they might tell others and even convince themselves that they've simply moved on from caring about your life. They present this emotional withdrawal as evidence of their own growth, their own healing, their own journey toward some form of enlightenment. But beneath this carefully constructed facade lies something far more primitive and wounded: the rage of a child who cannot bear to see others playing with toys they've convinced themselves they never wanted. The narcissist's silent revenge is often projected as spiritual superiority, as if their lack of engagement with your progress represents some higher form of consciousness, when in reality it's the most childish form of punishment imaginable. The targeting becomes increasingly sophisticated as your growth continues. They begin to understand with the calculated intuition of a predator exactly what matters most to you in this new phase of your authentic life. If you've found peace in spirituality, they might subtly undermine your beliefs through seemingly intellectual conversations that plant seeds of doubt. If you've discovered strength in new relationships, they might share carefully crafted stories designed to make you question the motives of those who genuinely support you. If you've found joy in creative expression, they might offer backhanded compliments that sound like support, but feel like poison coursing through your veins. This is revenge masquerading as concerned sabotage dressed up as wisdom destruction, pretending to be love. Jung understood that the shadow, those aspects of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge, will always find a way to express itself in healthy individuals. Shadow work becomes a conscious process of integration and growth. But in the narcissist, the shadow expresses itself through this silent campaign of systematically undermining those who remind them of their own unlived potential. Your healing journey becomes a constant reminder of the path they refuse to take, the inner work they refuse to do, the authenticity they refuse to embrace, and because they cannot destroy the mirror itself without exposing their own darkness, they choose instead to slowly, quietly, systematically attempt to crack it through relentless psychological pressure. The most devastating aspect of this silent revenge is how it targets your sense of reality and self-trust. Unlike overt abuse, which leaves clear evidence and obvious wounds, this form of cruelty operates in the spaces between words, in the pauses between responses, in the subtle shifts of energy that you feel but cannot quite articulate. You begin to question your own perceptions. Maybe you're being too sensitive. Maybe you're imagining the coldness, the calculation, the deliberate withholding of warmth and support. This is precisely the intended effect, to make you doubt the very intuition and self-awareness that enabled your growth in the first place. They become absolute. Experts at what I call achievement poisoning. Every success you experience is met with responses so carefully calibrated to drain the joy from your accomplishment that you begin to dread sharing good news with them. They might respond with immediate redirection to their own struggles, or offer congratulations so hollow and mechanical that they feel like carefully disguised insults. They might bring up past failures or future challenges, the exact moment you express happiness about present victories. Over time, you find yourself editing your joy, diminishing your achievements, hiding your growth. Not because they've explicitly demanded it, but because their silent disapproval has systematically taught you that your flourishing is somehow an act of aggression against their fragile ego. The timing of their emotional unavailability becomes suspiciously precise. When you need support during challenging moments in your growth journey, they become mysteriously busy, distracted, or emotionally inaccessible. When you experience breakthroughs that would benefit from shared celebration, they suddenly develop crises that require all the emotional energy in the room. When you're vulnerable about the inevitable difficulties of healing and change, they offer advice so generic and disconnected that it feels like they're reading from a script rather than speaking from their heart. This isn't coincidence. This is strategic, emotional abandonment designed to teach you that growing beyond their influence means growing completely alone. Jung spoke about the process of individuation as inherently threatening to those who remain unconscious. Your journey toward wholeness, toward authenticity, toward genuine self-love, represents everything they fear about their own inner landscape. You've done the work they refuse to do, faced the truths they refuse to see, embrace the vulnerability they've spent their entire lives avoiding. Your very existence becomes a constant challenge to their carefully constructed psychological defenses, and so they respond with this silent form of warfare that seeks to punish you for having the courage they fundamentally lack. The social dimension of their silent revenge is perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of their campaign. They don't openly criticize you or obviously undermine your relationships. Instead, they engage in what might be called reputation erosion. They plant subtle seeds of doubt about your stability, your judgment, your reliability. They express concern about your changes in ways that sound caring but feel invasive. They share your private struggles with others under the guise of seeking advice on how to help you, while actually positioning themselves as the long-suffering friend or family member who's trying to cope with your difficult transformation. This allows them to maintain their carefully crafted image as supportive, while systematically undermining the foundation of trust and respect you've built with others. The cruelest aspect of this silent revenge is how it targets the very qualities that represent your most significant growth. If you've become more assertive, they paint you as aggressive. If you've developed healthy boundaries, they characterize you as selfish. If you've found your authentic voice, they suggest you've become difficult or unreasonably demanding. If you've learned to prioritize your own legitimate needs, they imply you've become narcissistic yourself. This isn't accidental. It's a deliberate attempt to weaponize your healing against you, to make you afraid of the very changes that have brought you peace and authenticity. What Jung would find particularly fascinating about this phenomenon is how it reveals the narcissist's deepest terror. The fear that growth and healing are actually possible and that their own psychological stagnation is a conscious choice rather than an inevitable fate. Your transformation threatens the very foundation of their worldview, which depends entirely on the belief that people can't really Change that healing is impossible, that authenticity is a naive luxury for the psychologically unsophisticated. By growing, by healing, by becoming whole, you've essentially proven that every excuse they've ever made for their own emotional bankruptcy is an elaborate lie, and for this unforgivable act of hope made manifest, you must be made to suffer. The silent revenge often escalates precisely when their traditional forms of control no longer work, when guilt trips lose their manipulative power, when emotional manipulation fails to generate the desired response, when your boundaries remain firm. Despite their various sophisticated attempts to cross them, they resort to this more psychologically advanced form of warfare. It's revenge for your immunity to their traditional weapons, punishment for developing the very inner strength that makes their previous forms of control completely ineffective. But here's what the narcissist cannot understand, what their wounded consciousness fundamentally cannot grasp: every act of silent revenge against your growth actually serves as further confirmation that you're on the right path. Their discomfort with your healing is not evidence that you should slow down or hide your progress. It's proof that you're finally living authentically enough to threaten the systems of control and manipulation that once held you captive. Their silent punishment becomes paradoxically a form of validation that you're doing exactly what you need to do to reclaim your life and your deepest truth. The ultimate irony of the narcissist's silent revenge is that it often becomes the final catalyst for complete emotional freedom from their toxic influence. When you recognize these patterns for what they truly are, not random coldness or natural relationship drift, but calculated punishment for your personal growth, you gain the clarity needed to make the definitive choice between your healing and their comfort. And anyone who would punish you for becoming whole, who would seek revenge against your growth, who would silently sabotage your journey toward authenticity, has revealed themselves to be fundamentally incompatible with the life you're building and the person you're courageously becoming in trying to punish your growth. They've actually given you the greatest gift possible: absolute clarity about who belongs in your healed life and who does not.